The post-game clip looked simple at first. Caitlin Clark walked past Marina Mabrey after Indiana's win in Toronto. Mabrey appeared to remain standing in the same area, and the internet immediately filled in the rest of the story. Some called it a deliberate snub. Others saw nothing more than two competitors leaving the floor after a physical game. But a longer fan shot angle now being circulated adds something the original viral moment did not have: the seconds before Clark walked by. And those extra seconds make the situation more interesting, not necessarily more conclusive. This happened after the Indiana Fever's 101-95 road win over the Toronto Tempo on August 18th. Indiana extended its winning streak to 5 games. Kelsey Mitchell scored 29 points. Caitlin Clark finished with 24 points and 7 assists, and Marina Mabrey led Toronto with 22. On the scoreboard, it was another important Fever victory in the playoff race. But the game also produced one of the night's most discussed non-basketball moments because the competitive temperature had already been rising long before the final buzzer. The key event came in the third quarter. Mabrey and Mitchell got tangled in a physical sequence, exchanged words and shoves, and both were assessed technical fouls. What made the moment stand out was Mitchell's reaction. She is not normally the Fever player people expect to see in the middle of an extended confrontation, so when she pointed, talked back, and refused to simply move on, the sequence immediately drew attention. That context is important because the post-game interaction between Clark and Mabrey happened after a game in which Mabrey had just been involved in a heated moment with Clark's teammate. It is easy to understand why viewers connected those two scenes. What we cannot do is claim that Clark definitely walked past Mabrey because of what happened with Mitchell. Clark has not publicly said that, and the video without clear audio cannot tell us what she was thinking. The new angle described in the circulating footage appears to show Mabrey in the area before Clark reaches her. The person who recorded it says Mabrey was there for a noticeable amount of time and interprets that as her waiting to interact with Clark. Then Clark approaches and continues walking past. Mabrey's reaction is being interpreted by some viewers as frustration, but there is an important limitation. Standing near someone does not prove you were waiting for a conversation. A facial expression does not prove anger, and unless the footage clearly shows an attempted handshake, a direct greeting, or audible words, calling it a confirmed snub goes beyond what the video itself establishes. That does not mean the clip is meaningless. The reason it has become so compelling is the history between these two players. Clark and Mabrey were part of one of the most replayed WNBA confrontations of the 2025 season. During an Indiana-Connecticut game in June 2025, a physical sequence escalated after Clark was hit in the face. Mabrey then shoved Clark during the confrontation and received a technical foul. Months later, Mabrey publicly reflected on that incident and acknowledged that she had gone too far. That history means viewers are never going to see a Clark-Mabrey interaction as completely neutral. And yet, what Clark said before this Toronto game makes the situation much more complicated than a simple rivalry narrative. Before facing the Tempo, Clark was asked about Mabrey and publicly praised her. She described Mabrey as having the best season of her career and spoke about how talented she is. She also highlighted the consistency Mabrey has shown at this level. That is not what somebody sounds like when publicly trying to build a feud. So now we have 3 pieces of the story that do not fit neatly together. There is the old 2025 confrontation between Clark and Mabrey. There is Clark giving Mabrey genuine basketball respect before the August 18th game. Then there is the physical Mitchell-Mabrey exchange during the game, followed by the post-game clip that many viewers interpreted as Clark walking straight past Mabrey. That contradiction is exactly why this video spread. If Clark had criticized Mabrey before the game, then ignored her afterward, the story would almost be too easy. But she did the opposite. She praised her. She acknowledged her season. She gave her credit as a player. Then hours later, the cameras captured a moment that looked much colder. The question is whether anything actually changed between those 2 points, or whether viewers are placing a much larger meaning on a few seconds of body language. And this is where team dynamics enter the conversation. The Fever have spent this season playing with an edge. Opponents defend Clark physically because allowing her comfortable space is a bad strategy. Mitchell has been on one of the best scoring runs of her career. Aaliyah Boston remains central to everything Indiana does inside. Sophie Cunningham brings her own competitiveness. When one player gets into a confrontation, the rest of the group notices. That does not mean every teammate automatically holds the same grudge. It does mean that an incident involving Mitchell is not happening in isolation. Indiana was trying to close out a difficult road game against a Toronto team fighting through a long losing streak. Mabrey plays with obvious competitive intensity, and the tempo needed every possession. Physical defense was always going to be part of the game. In fact, Toronto's edge is one reason Mabrey has been so important to the expansion franchise. The Tempo signed her to a multi-year deal before the season, and she has become one of their central offensive players. She entered this matchup in the middle of the strongest scoring season of her career. Clark's pre-game praise was based on something real, so reducing Mabrey to the player who shoved Caitlin Clark misses most of the basketball story. The same is true on the other side. Reducing Clark's walk-by to proof of a personal vendetta ignores the fact that post-game floors are chaotic. Players are moving toward tunnels, interviews, teammates, staff members, and fans. In Toronto, Clark also stayed around the court signing memorabilia and taking part in post-game obligations. A single angle can make an ordinary moment look more deliberate than it was, but the new footage does add one legitimate question. If Mabrey really was stationary in Clark's path for an extended stretch, was she hoping to acknowledge her? That is possible. It is just not proven. And that difference matters because sports content can go from analysis to fiction very quickly. The clip can show where two players were standing. It can show whether they crossed paths. It can show gestures and movement. It cannot reveal an internal motive that neither player has stated. That is especially important with Clark because almost every interaction around her gets amplified. A short exchange can become a rivalry. A hard foul can become a league-wide conspiracy. A missed handshake can become evidence of hatred. Once the narrative takes off, the original video often becomes less important than what people want it to mean. The stronger story here is not that Clark definitely rejected Mabrey. The stronger story is that their relationship on the court is more complicated than the internet wants it to be. They have history. They have competed physically. Mabrey has admitted she crossed the line in the past. Clark has still publicly praised her game. Mabrey then had a heated exchange with Mitchell, and afterward, a camera caught Clark and Mabrey passing within feet of each other without an obvious friendly interaction. That is enough to create tension without inventing anything else. There is also a basketball reason this matters. Indiana and Toronto are not two teams drifting through meaningless games. Indiana entered Toronto in the middle of a serious playoff push and left with a fifth straight victory. Clark had recently been named Eastern Conference Player of the Week. Mitchell was in the middle of a historic streak of 20-point performances. Every game was carrying more weight as the postseason approached. Toronto had a very different kind of pressure. The expansion tempo were sliding through a long losing streak and running out of postseason room. Mabrey was still producing, but losses were piling up. Pressure changes the way games feel. A hold becomes more annoying. A bump becomes more personal. A stare lasts a little longer. Players who might exchange a casual word in June can be in a completely different emotional state late in August. That still does not allow us to label private relationships from a few seconds of video. It simply explains why a tense post-game moment would not be surprising. And the story continued almost immediately. Indiana's 5-game winning streak ended 2 nights later in Dallas with a 91-85 loss to the Wings. Kelsey Mitchell scored 37 and set a league record by extending her streak to 21 straight games with at least 20 points. The Fever remained deep in the playoff race, and their focus quickly moved to the next games on the road. That is another reminder of how quickly players themselves have to move on. The internet can spend 3 days analyzing who looked at whom after a game. The teams have another opponent 48 hours later. Still, the Clark-Mabrey clip will keep generating discussion because it contains exactly what viral sports content feeds on: recognizable stars, old history, a recent confrontation, unclear body language, and a moment that can be interpreted in opposite ways. Clark supporters can watch it and see loyalty to Mitchell. Mabrey supporters can watch it and see a routine post-game crossing that has been exaggerated. Neutral viewers can look at the same footage and say there is simply not enough information to know. And all three reactions can exist because the video does not provide a definitive answer. The biggest mistake would be pretending that it does. If Clark and Mabrey eventually speak publicly about the moment, then the story changes. If another angle shows a clear attempted handshake or a direct exchange, then we have more evidence. If neither happens, the responsible conclusion remains limited to what is visible. The footage appears to show Mabrey in the area before Clark passes by. Clark does not appear to stop for an interaction in the clip being discussed. Anything beyond that, whether Mabrey was intentionally waiting, whether Clark deliberately ignored her, whether the Mitchell confrontation caused it, or whether there is now a personal feud, remains interpretation. And strangely, that uncertainty may be the most interesting part. Because before the game, Clark publicly respected Mabrey's basketball. During the game, Mabrey and Mitchell went at each other. After the game, Clark and Mabrey crossed paths without the kind of friendly moment viewers expected. That is real. The motive behind it is not. So the question is not whether the footage proves Caitlin Clark and Marina Mabrey suddenly hate each other. It does not. The better question is this. After everything that happened during the game, was Clark's walk-by a deliberate message to a player who had just clashed with her teammate? Or are fans turning an ordinary post-game moment into a rivalry chapter that the footage cannot actually prove?